Welcome to the Independent Artist Podcast, sponsored by the National Association of Independent Artists.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. I'm Will Armstrong, and I'm a mixed media artist.
I'm Douglas Sigworth, glassblower. Join our conversations with professional working artists. All right, welcome back to the show, everyone. We are battling some technical difficulties, so we're in a very good mood right now.
Look, let's be honest, Douglas. You're battling me, who's battling technical difficulties, and I take full responsibility for that. That's totally fine.
Oh, that's okay. But anyway, so how has your week been? How's everything been going since I saw you last?
Lovely. I actually had a little bit of a vacation. We went up to Jackson Hole, saw some fall foliage,
Nice.
Stayed in an incredible, old school hotel, saw some killer music.
Oh, yeah? What'd you see?
You know, I mentioned this last week. We actually are big Father John Misty fans, and we saw him do a solo performance, just a little 1 on 250 kind of courtyard performance, him and a guitar and his pianist accompanist.
You saw him again? Didn't you just see him in Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the shows every 2 weeks. I can see my favorites every couple of weeks.
All right,
I guess.
You're a groupie.
You know, I wouldn't say I'm a groupie, but we try to see him anytime we get the chance, and this was kind of a celebration of our anniversary. So
Cool. That's awesome.
Good times.
What?
Good times.
Good times.
How about yourself? What's going on?
Just getting everything off the list because next on my agenda is this surgery. So we've been talking about this for like a year, it seems like.
Yeah, it's it must be sweeps week, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting ready to go under the knife here at the Independent Artist.
I've just had this running list going of stuff I need to get done. I mean, I've had the luxury, not like you, where, you know, you tore your Achilles. It's like, okay, the world stops and you have to go under the knife and you have to just deal with it.
Right.
I'm trying to plan being off my foot for 3 months, all the work we want to have made for projects we're in the middle of. Household projects?
To be honest, I think I'd rather have it my way. I think I'd rather have the rug jerked out from underneath me than to have to try to plan every little thing. It's like, well, can I reach the remote? How many books am I going to read? What do I have downloaded? Do I have this? What am I going to piss in?
I've thought that thing too. I almost wish I keep finding more stuff that I'm like, well, then I have to have this done before I can't walk. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a nightmare, to be honest. I'm not sure how you're doing it, but a lot of empathy for you, and that kind of goes towards the topic of my conversation with Anthony this week,
sure.
and we'll get to that in a little bit. But, man, we both have a lot of empathy for you, as do a lot of our listeners. Not all of them. There's a couple jerks out there.
Are there? Okay.
Yeah, just a couple.
Not naming names.
Just kidding. No, I don't know that there are. I just assume.
Well, I have not blown glass for 3 months steady in 30 years. I mean, it's such
crazy.
a bizarre feeling to think of everything that's going to, you know, be involved in that.
Sure. Now, you're talking about 3 months of recovery. Is that 0 to fully recovered, or are we talking 3 months to the point where you can get out of a wheelchair, or what are you looking at?
3 months till I can start putting weight on my foot.
You're seated for 3 months. You're in a bed.
Yes, and I believe if I'm lucky, maybe a couple of weeks before that 3 months, I can start in a walking boot. Then I'll be in a walking boot for a while. So yeah, there's no glass blowing. There's no art shows. There's none of that while I recover from this.
And while you're recovering, and I'm sorry to be interviewing you on this topic, but I mean, you can't put any weight for 3 months. 3 months is not when you're going to be back. You're going to, I mean, this is, what are we talking about? 6 months to a year before you're doing shows again, or what?
It's hard to say because I technically need this done on both feet. So I can't do both at the same time. Renee's not strong enough to carry me to the can. So I'm going to have to do one at a time. And hopefully after the 3 months is up and I can start walking in a boot, I'm going to see just how much work I can start making then. And frankly, as any self-employed artist, look at the bank account and find out what I can actually do. If it makes sense to keep, go on to the next foot, or if I need to get back to work and make some money.
Ugh, brutal. Well, our empathy is completely out to you, and however you need a hand, my friend, we'll be there to help Renee or whatever you need. We'll figure it out, right?
Thanks. Yeah, I hope so. Well, I will say this. So one thing I've talked about on the show is one of the things we're planning is when we shut down the studio, we have to repair our furnace. This glass blowing furnace is 17 years old. So it's not insulating as well as it did back in the beginning. So the elements are on, working way hotter. Their circuit breakers trip from time to time. So I need to reconstruct the whole furnace and rebuild it.
You don't. You're not going to be doing that. Who's doing that?
Well, I put out on social media the happy day when all my furnace parts arrived, all 2,200 pounds of them on a big semi-truck. And a lot of good friends in the area said, hey, you need a hand? I'll be there. So I think I have a crew that's going to help us next week so I can get the surgery taken care of and get the furnace torn apart and rebuilt before I go under the knife.
Good Lord, man. Well, good luck. We're not starting out particularly lightly, but it's the matter at hand.
No.
Right? That's what we get to. This is reality.
This is the reality of what it's like working for ourselves and working in a business that is a fine craft business that's so physical. I think I took that aspect of it for granted when you're 25 years old and you start working in glass blowing. It's just so freaking fun and cool and heavy. And I've always been somebody who liked to be active and to do physical fitness and all that kind of stuff. So it's a perfect thing for me and my life. But when the body starts to break down a bit, it's scary.
Yeah, it is scary. Well, whatever we can do to lend a hand, and now I'm figuring out why we interviewed so many good Wisconsin artists and Midwesterners. Let's rally the forces and get you taken care of, right?
Yeah.
Man.
But I got to say, this talk that you had with Anthony today, where he talks about the stuff he went through, so much of his talk that you guys had hit me in a very personal place.
Yeah. I hear you. It was there were definitely some questions that I asked him, kind of thinking about you and what you're going through as well. And he's such an honest and forthcoming guy, and really, I kind of felt like I needed that talk to be honest with, like, getting my own kind of groove back in with the podcast and with the show and with interviewing and getting excited about the whole project, really. So it was good for me to talk to him as well. It's been this has been more of a kind of a serious talk that you and I have had. The kind of preamble is normally a little more yuck it up a little bit and get our yucks on, but it's important to talk about all of these different things. And
I think about last week's talk with Lisa Christine, and one of the things that she said that really resonated was the thing she wants to do in her work is she wants her work to take somebody out of their head and into their heart. And I really felt like this week's talk with Anthony, it's all about heart. It's just, it's really cool.
Nice.
But before we get into his talk, I guess we got a few art show topics we could probably cover before then.
Yeah.
So one thing that has kind of resurfaced is that whole topic of having art show artists on juries. You know?
Oh, man, we are going to go serious the whole way through, right?
We are. What do you think about that? Some people are complaining. Right. They say it's nepotism.
No. Listen. Yeah. People are not complaining. I said person or two are complaining. They have a loud soapbox that they're standing on. But the idea of, like, this is what we do for a living, right? Art shows.
Sure.
We do this thing. And a couple of people have broached topics. Should we have art show artists on? Because, like you just said, is it nepotism? Are people scratching, I scratch your back, you scratch mine? No. I will wholeheartedly stand up and say, no, you have to have people in our industry on the juries, because otherwise they don't know what they're looking at. If you are, if you
like
have
an academic doesn't know what it's like being in the trenches and what we're making, or how we're doing what we do.
And they don't know, Douglas, the subject has kind of come up, but I feel like it's a couple of loud people. There's a lot of sour grapes in this business, like any other business. They think if they're not getting into shows, it's this person's fault, it's that person's fault. And really, you just look at yourself. At the end of the day, the only common denominator, and I've talked about this a lot, is you.
Sure.
If I'm not getting into shows, it's not because I'm an asshole, which I may be to some people. It's because my work maybe doesn't fit what their idea is for a certain show. I mean, you and I have both worked really hard to get to where we are, where we can honestly expect to put together a season. Sure. You can cobble together a season that is of quality shows and where you want to be. I feel lucky enough to be where I want to be. a lot of the times. But if I'm not, it's not because this juror doesn't like me or this isn't happening or it's nepotism. It's because I didn't fill their vision. You know, I feel like art show artists are, it's not nepotistic as much as it is a family where you all kind of recognize the quality that's within.
Right. It's about the work. And it's about who's being chosen as an artist juror. It comes down to integrity. I believe the people who are selecting these members to represent the jury, they're putting thought into who can be impartial, who can make good decisions, who can make, because at the end of the day, when the show is juried and they get to say, these are our 150 or 200 artists, then you look at the jury and who selected them, and there is a part of pride of who you're selecting, that you are truly picking the cream of the crop, and it's a competition.
Fantastic point. I mean, you and I have both juried shows, and when I look at it at the end of the day, it's like, yeah, maybe they cut me off in traffic on the way into the show, but their work is A++. It's like the integrity has to be there. We've talked to a lot of different artists on the show, whether it's Cliff or David Bjurstrom or Deb Adelson, people that have been on juries before and that you trust to be on juries, that their integrity, like you just said, that's the perfect point. Their integrity is as much on the line as, you know, you don't want to put together a show that looks like it's full of hacks.
Okay. well, the next thing I wanted to say about that is we've already established on episodes past that there should just be a jeweler on every single jury, because for one, there's so many jewelers out there. And we need a jeweler who can say, this work, the components are imported and just put together. This work is original. This work is not. You know what I mean? You really need a jeweler.
Yeah, you're standing up on my soapbox. This is our gospel here, is the way I've kind of learned through being married to a jeweler as well as being around all this. You know, look at the percentage of jewelry in your show. If you have a jeweler on there, you know what? A lot of times you can weed through some of the stuff and they can be like, hey, that's digital, that's cleaned up. Their welds are this type of weld. This is hand fabricated versus casting, all of that kind of thing. So,
but none of us are experienced in every medium. We maybe can recognize designs that are strong or not strong. But the good thing about a varied jury is there's conversation. You can say, hey, what do you think about this? Hey, I don't know much about how this is done. Can you tell me this or that? And it's a good part of the process. It's an important part of the process.
Yeah, I truly think it is.
So here's a question. How do you feel about peer juries, on site, when you've got people in your medium who come by and score you for getting re-invited back in again?
It's a good question. I know of a couple of shows that do that. I don't mind it. A lot of times those folks will get their feelings hurt if I don't immediately give them all of their attention. I've definitely been talking to clients when the juror, like, I don't really care whether or not I get a prize. A prize is nice, but I don't care. But I really care whether I get into a show again.
Well, I'm talking these peer juries who are...
That's what I mean. And it's like, if somebody's coming around to dole out prizes, right? And I'm sitting there talking to a client that I know I'm getting ready to sell a $5,000 piece of artwork to. I'm not going to put the taps on my boots and start and
doing
a dance for them. Oh, here, let me show you what this is. Let me tell you what. Oh, and I'm not going to do it. But it with the peer jury, I feel like a lot of times those guys get their nose bent out of shape if you don't immediately do it and start doing the little dance. So I don't love it.
Yeah,
I really don't love it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same idea behind having artists on the jurying into the show. I think it's a good idea, but I don't necessarily love it. It is that kind of that, you can jury me from your remote place where I don't have to see your reaction, but I don't necessarily want
yeah, also it takes the artist, if they're at the show. I was talking to a good friend who was jurying Plaza, and they were coming around and trying to do their best job, but at the same time, they were having to be at the show and jury the show as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like jury for prize money, and it's like, well, you're not selling your work, and I look at this thing very much as a business and how much I expect to get paid per hour at an art show, and they're not getting paid anything because volunteers aren't selling their work. As hard as they're trying. They do a great job with the volunteer corps, but they're not doing any actual selling. They don't know how to sell your work, and they shouldn't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's part of the deal with being in person at a show like that and being upfront and personal, selling our work. We have this equal split between the creative and the business. And it's like, we're all business right now. This isn't about, making some juror feel good. This is all about making the sales in the moment.
And we make those choices too.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we are on, the people will come by and I'll be in the middle of a sale and somebody will come by. You get like the pre-tickle where they're like, the jury's, I just wanted to let you know.
Straighten everything out.
Don't give me jury foreplay. I don't want it. I don't need foreplay with it. Just let's just get right to it. Let's get to it. I just, come in here, and if the juror wants to talk to me, they're going to talk to me. And if we were like, it's a large-scale illustration, and I don't like it. And we're like, great,
okay.
F off, hit the road. I don't need you. I'm selling, right?
Right. Hey, well, new topic. You brought up, you mentioned David Bierstrom being on jury. I'm pretty excited about fact that we've got another art show artist taking his hand as art show director.
Dude, I'm not excited as much as I am relieved.
Yeah, there you go.
A great show in great hands. So,
totally.
So David Bierstrom is very close with the former directors of Art in the High Desert, and Carla Fox is going to lead him and help him however he can, but he's doing it. They're a new location, lots of exciting things coming up, and I really feel like this is in good hands.
We were just talking last week about the amount of shows that are going away, so a heartfelt thank you for bringing one back. So that's awesome.
Hell yeah, Brad. Rise like a phoenix, my friend.
Yes.
Good luck to you, and seriously, your whole community has your back on this one.
Yes. Well, we talked about that this is Anthony Hansen week, and it's also a take two on Anthony Hansen week, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
This was almost a take two preamble. We are having technical difficulties, but
it was.
You guys rallied and you gave it another go, and it was an amazing, heartfelt talk, which I really love, Will.
It didn't feel like a podcast to me. It just felt like sitting down, and I tried to set up some of the things that he and I have talked about in the past.
Mm-hmm.
I've always admired the guy, and I've always felt a real soul kind of connection when we talk, if that's not too cheesy, but I don't care if it is. It's just how I feel when I'm talking
he talks
to him,
in this interview about how he doesn't do small talk. He looks right in your eye, and he says the thing. So let's shut our mouths up and let's hear what he has to say, shall we?
Love it. Let's do it. Anthony Hansen on the Independent Artist Podcast. This episode of the Independent Artist Podcast is brought to you by Zap, the digital application service where artists and art festivals connect.
I see here there are some new features with the events list category through Zap, which will help us with looking up new shows to fill a spot in our schedule.
I feel like I should have something to say, but I wasn't really listening to you because I'm looking at the events list right now, and it's pretty cool. Okay, so you drop the menu down, and there at the bottom, go scrolling all the way, about third thing down in the smaller print, it just says events list.
That's right. All of the shows appear here, regardless of their application deadline. You can use filtering and sorting to narrow down your search to find the right show that fills your desired time frame or location.
I know a lot of people love that calendar. I like seeing the list of events. I like scrolling through and doom scrolling late at night. It's like online dating. They don't let you swipe left or right, but you can figure out who you want to date coming up here. I've got Anthony Hansen here on the podcast, and let's just jump right into this thing. I feel like we have a present moment guest here on the show, so let's just be in the present and talk to our good friend, Anthony Hansen, metal artist coming all the way out of California. How are you today, sir?
I'm good. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's always a treat to talk to you, for sure.
Thanks, man. Absolutely. Likewise. And you have been on our radar as far as getting on. We actually tried to record earlier and had a couple of hiccups, so I appreciate you being patient.
Hiccups, is that what you call that?
My wife calls it having a big tantrum.
I think it bothered you more than it bothered me, for sure.
Yeah. I tend to lead a life where I kind of drive 100 miles an hour right up to the finish line and get out and think I can just handle whatever. And, the technical difficulties were a little much to handle that week.
Welcome to this world. I feel like there's, whether you're working on updating your website or trying to upload something for Instagram or whatever, you just feel like, oh my God, this should not be this hard.
Right.
So this is not what I do. I don't want to fuck around with this. I want to just, be human and make a connection or make art. I don't want to have to try to figure out what's wrong with my microphone or something.
Right. Or your brand new headphones. I appreciate the purchase, man.
Yeah, for sure. It's I had to drive to Los Angeles to get them, but that's fine.
Wow. That's a drive.
So this better be worth it is all I can say.
Oh yeah. I'm on my A game. Don't worry. I got you.
Exactly.
But how have you been getting on, man? Your show season has kind of wound to a close. How you been?
Yeah, it was a good show season, with the pandemic, like everybody, you had kind of a forced opportunity to, what are we going to do different since we don't have the options, especially 2 years ago. Yeah, we squeaked through with some commission work and some custom work, and then this year did a few shows, and it's great realizing that community is still out there and we all still get to see each other and stuff. It was definitely good to renew some of those connections, for sure.
Definitely. You had kind of I want to talk, we'll get in the Wayback Machine and kind of talk about some of your history too, but I think it's sometimes more interesting too to talk about some of the shit that we've all gone through and some of the hiccups that we've come. You and I, yours was a little bit different, but came out through the other side of COVID and reached the kind of the starting line. Shows were starting back up, and you and I both hit this weird thing where we had a health issue that kept us from getting back on the road. It's like we made it all the way through COVID, and then we got hit with a big surprise. You feel like talking about that?
Yeah. I mean, you mean about my back?
Yeah, your back and kind of your hip.
Yeah, that was actually before COVID. Okay. I did some shows, but yeah, that was like 20. That was almost 3.5 years ago now when that first started. But yeah, in the midst of it, I spent 6 months using a walker.
Oh my God!
It was really. I just chronic pain. I'd always felt like I wanted to be the guy who's like, man, Anthony, he's really dealing with some heavy stuff, but smile on his face, and
right.
That is easier said than done when you're in the midst of like, how am I going to make it to the bathroom right now, or how I'm going to roll over in bed? It was really, really discouraging,
and kind of a mystery too at the time. You didn't really know what it was?
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. I'm a cyclist. I probably have chronic work position for the last 15 years, and I fell playing basketball with my youngest son, middle school basketball game. Anyways, it just got to the point where I couldn't even walk, and it was months and then years of dealing with that pain, and then slowly things kind of like relaxing and getting to the point where I could get back to work, or I could get back to a show and ask a neighbor for some help, set in my booth or whatever. But it's way, way, way better now. I'm swimming real regular now.
Oh, good. You were a surfer before. Are you able to surf again?
Yeah, can still get in the water. Yeah, nice. So it's way better. I don't take any anti-inflammatories. I haven't for a couple months. Every once in a while, I'll feel a tinge of something, but I'm real religious with doing my exercises. And then my wife and I, we swim in the ocean most evenings for like 20 minutes. So that cold water and the movement is really good for me.
Yeah, I mentioned you're in California and you had to go to LA to get your headphones, but where? tell the folks where you're located.
We're in the central coast of California. Yeah, right in the middle between LA and San Francisco. We're right in the middle between Santa Barbara and Santa Cruz on the coast.
Nice. So that's where you guys are swimming. You've got a incredible wife who I've met. That's a big kind of part of you, and I'm sure she helped you get through that. But to kind of circle back and talk a little bit more about that injury, like what I experienced, and you and I touched on this when I saw you on the road a little bit, but I mean, it does something to not just your I mean, it kind of does something to your manhood too. You feel like you're this kind of virile, strong human that can get out there and exercise and do big, strong, hard things, and all of a sudden, you're sitting on the couch or you're using a walker. I mean, my 82-year-old father-in-law has knee problems and will not use a walker. It's like, it's just, it's tough, man.
It was, yeah. I mean, I is it extreme or is it not? I totally thought about taking my own life in the midst of, just being completely broken, and just, if this is what the future is moving forward,
is
it worth it? Yeah. I mean, it's like, will we never go backpacking again? Will I never be able to get dressed, standing up again? Intimacy with your you going to the bathroom, everything was just, so there were several times where I was at work and I thought, would you do something to end this? And then I just thought, you know what, my wife or my boys are going to come to the shop and find me. I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
There's no way. But I just, I feel like it's a totally natural human thing to think, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. It was really hard. It was lots of tears. My wife was great. She just kept saying, hey babe, we had to look at it in chunks of like 6 months. If I looked at it day to day, I was never making improvement, but it was like, well, if you look back 6 months, maybe I'm a little bit better. And that's really what it's been. It's I think this is coming up next March will be 4 years, I think.
Okay.
And it's just been very, very slow, and doing my exercises and paying attention to my posture. And it just slowly has gotten better. But it was discouraging.
That's incredible, man. I'm so glad you are managing that, and that you're not managing it as an understanding that that's what you are going to live with forever, but as something that you can kind of handle. I remember the new feeling for me was, when I blew out my Achilles and I've got this cast on, and I'm elevating for all this time. And what I found was a claustrophobia in my own body.
Oh, yeah.
Where
You're
I just
trapped.
was like, yeah, you're trapped. I was like, I don't want to be in this body right now. The big thing, you and I are both lucky to have those kind of supportive partners, but the lucky thing that I found was that, I had her, but she was like, okay, you're going to have your physical therapy, but you're going to have your mental therapy next time something happens, because we're in it for the long haul here. And you were awful. I just was a couch sitting, phone scrolling, I just waited out the time because I knew I could get through it that way, but you had to deal with it a little bit differently.
Yeah. It's the physical toll really pushes on the mental part. And if you're not careful, it affects your relationships. It affects your outlook, and that's not who you want to be. I know. And that's not how I want to be. But man, when you're in the midst of it, it is so, so difficult.
Yeah. Our good friend Douglas is getting ready to go through that too, and we're going to talk about that on kind of the preamble and his surgery. But he's got his, looking like the light at the end of the tunnel is a train. Here it comes. Yeah. He's got the surgery, and it's coming for him, and he's going to need some support too. But
it just really makes you appreciate any kind of support you've got, and then it just gives you empathy for people who are facing that kind of thing with a oncoming train is for sure the destination, or there's no light at all. I remember in the midst of it, people would say, oh, try this or do that, and you just feel like you're walking around with a blindfold on. I'm like trying to figure out what's the right thing to do. Nothing seems to work, and I think the best thing that I had from anybody was just empathy. Like, man, that's tough,
Sure.
Having that as a parent with other parents whose kids have been trying to figure stuff out or whatever. It's just, you don't want advice. You just want somebody to say, hey, I know that's so hard. It's got to be so hard. And that was often the best thing to hear.
Yeah. I see you. I remember talking to a good buddy of mine who passed away. He's an art show artist. That passed away from Lou Gehrig's disease. And I always made sure to be like, it is good to see you, as opposed to like your typical, hey, how are you? Because it's like, dude, I'm fucking terrible right now. Thank you for not saying, how are you? Because you can see, in degrees. But
those people that'll just hold space with you, and which is uncomfortable, right? I care about you. I know you tore your Achilles. I know you're frustrated. Is there some way that I can make a connection with you, that I can hang in there, knowing I can't fix it, knowing that I love you, and just hold that space with you in a way that's human, and not be frustrated that there's nothing I can do. I mean, that's a really, I think especially, for my wife, Sandra, and Susan, as partners, that's a really tough place to be, because they know it's going to be a long time. It's really difficult, and there's very little you can do other than just empathizing.
Absolutely. Or get somebody to get some professional help. I'm a proponent of that.
Oh, me too, for sure. For
sure. But, you talk about the empathy, and that's something that I wanted to bring up with you as far as, like, when I see you, I feel like there's automatically, it doesn't really matter the time, but I always feel like there's a connection, and you're always trying to get more of I feel like you look a little bit deeper, you're piercing a little bit eyes as far as, and it's a welcoming, embracing piercing, but it's also kind of an intensity, but I feel like there's a spirituality there whenever I get to see you. What's your spirituality like as far as creation and just your day to day?
Ooh, that's a deep question. I mean, I mean, as far as like spirituality, religion, I was raised super, super conservative, Seventh-day Adventist, legalistic, all the rules, known for all the stuff you don't do.
Yeah. How do you hold any of that still, or is that?
I don't. I would say I mean, I get it. We all have artist friends and stuff who are in the Mormon church or devout Catholic or whatever. I don't have any problem holding space for those people. Sure. I get it. That's how I was raised. But yeah, I would say, if anything, I'm agnostic. I told my mom a couple months ago, I'm all for, Mom, there being a heaven and God's going to come again and whatever, but I'm not hanging my hat on that at all.
So. More like I look at a lot of those stories, or all of them really, is just kind of parables and how not to be.
And they're all the same.
Yeah.
I mean, and Christianity is one of the youngest religions, so it's like, I was raised though that the Bible is the truth and God's come in and you better not do anything on the Sabbath. So I had a lot of guilt and stuff to try to navigate after. But yeah, I feel like, the biggest thing we can do is, and that I'm interested in doing, is making connections and loving each other. I think if you do that, you're more godly than a lot of people who claim to be godly.
Yeah. I mean, there's your Jesus.
Sure.
Right there, I mean, and I kind of was thinking spirituality more as far as like how you see that non-religiously. I don't know that I definitely don't consider myself a religious person. You just, you look at the teachings of Christ, and it's like how not to be an asshole is how you can read that as a play-by-play. But I'm thinking more like, you're an intense kind of guy, but you're an easygoing guy. I feel like that's
my wife has teased me, hey, babe, just because you'll ask somebody about it doesn't mean everyone wants to talk about it. And I definitely have probably wandered into a few conversations that are like, ooh, I hope I didn't say too much. But I want to know, and I want to be the friend that when I say, how's your morning going? And somebody says, it's really tough. I would hope I can be open enough to have somebody say, yeah, I'm not having a good morning. And
that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you too. Like it's, I remember even just set up, because we usually have a little pre thing where we're talking on the little backstage before I hit the record button. And it's like, Susan and I were talking about this the other day, where you and I were in the pre-show preamble before the other recording that didn't work. And you said, well, how's Minnesota? And I was like, it's fine. And you're like, there's a little catch in your voice. It's what I love about you is that we don't end up talking about
the Niners.
Exactly. Or if you do, you can talk about something a little deeper within it. I don't know. It seems like there's always a question that you have that takes the conversation a little deeper, a little more interesting. So
yeah, I'm interested. I want to know. I feel like sometimes, my wife and I have talked about that. I feel sensitive, maybe ironically so, to asking things of people that maybe is none of my business or whatever. But I'm interested in making a connection and like knowing the truth of where you're at, and then hopefully I can be somebody that sharing that with feels safe. And I don't know, my dad has always said that every hard thing you go through in life connects you to another segment of the population. And I feel like those connections, you're not injuries, mental health, kids, loss, those connections is what really makes life special, and usually those connections are hard won. We've lost artists on the road. We've, losing Mark, losing Wild Bill, those kinds of things. You see Jody, you see those people around now. It's like the connection that you have from going through those things together is special. And that's the only way we all make it. I feel like we're here to connect and to love each other.
Did you get there on your own, do you think? Or do you feel like this is, do you do a lot of reading as far as kind of getting yourself to that point of, because that seems to be a little bit of a Zen thing about you, a little bit more in the present, in the now, a little Eckhart Tolle there, or is it just you?
Those are some lofty names, but I don't know. I just feel like we've navigated some stuff as parents. My wife navigated stuff early on in our relationship. And I feel like if you want to just end up having somebody who will walk next to you and say, hey, let's do this, you really realize the value of leaning in, being vulnerable, and then hopefully being able to be on the receiving end of when somebody needs that as well. So I feel like you and I were both in relationships before. I was married once before. I mean, all those connecting points, and then you're with somebody like, hey, I'm in a tough spot. Here's what I'm going through. And you go, oh, yeah. I've gone through that. I've navigated stuff. And I just feel like there's such benefit to not glossing over that, but going, hey, at least being open to like, tell me more, if not sort of like investigating.
Absolutely. I mean, the gratitude that you can kind of let yourself have, arguments that you've gotten with people in the past, and the way I argue with my partner now, the way I argue with her, it's like sometimes I'll just stop and be like, just have an appreciation for it. You're being a reasonable human being right now. I can take that and understand what you're saying. And quit smiling during our argument. What do you look like a lunatic.
Yeah, I feel like it's just there's a safety that comes from, that's another thing my dad has said, that there's nothing more seductive than being understood.
Oh, man.
There's no way to be understood other than to be vulnerable, and being vulnerable is risky. But man, the times where you've had a conversation or somebody shared something with you that's tough or whatever, you really start really looking forward to seeing that person again or crossing paths. And it's different than like surface stuff. And that's not to put down or minimize anybody who's not as comfortable. Getting naked. And if, like, here I am, here's everything that's going on with me. I mean, that everyone's got their level of that, but I do think there's those connections that come from that willingness it's like a drug. You really want that and enjoy that when somebody will meet you there, like, oh, I'll say something vulnerable, or I'll apologize, and you trust each other.
The power in that is amazing. Yeah,
totally. I feel like you're good at that. That's something I appreciate about you.
Well, when you go through life like me, you have to be good at apologizing.
For sure. And that's me. I can be, energy level for sure when I'm not at my best. And I have plenty of opportunities to apologize. And my wife will just say, that's okay, babe. I know you,
Nice.
Yeah. It's like, I know, but I'm working on it. I'm working on it, babe.
Yeah. But you're always, I don't know. I feel like we're working, we're always working on getting to be a little bit better and trying to stay on that path. But, yeah. Hey, you're in California. You talked about you're pretty close to the coast. You do a lot of swimming. You do a lot of surfing. Talking about reality, that's got to inhibit what we do for a living and how you get out there. How do you do that? How do you manage that?
Yeah, I know. I think that's a concept that a lot of people think must be how it is here. I don't have any problem at all spending 7 days a week in the shop, because that's how we live here. The ocean is always at the end of the street. My bike is in the garage. There's always some nature to just go and while away your time with. But the only way we're able to stay here is by me going to work, my wife going to work. So I don't have a hard time. And I like being in the studio. My studio is in an old dairy barn from the early 1900s. It's on an old ranch.
Nice.
But yeah, it's nice having that, on the way to work, you're having a glance at the waves, you're taking in the ocean, you're smelling the breeze, whatever.
And you can still separate that, okay, as far as your how work and play and living almost in a resort
I think always being, self-employed, there's always the pull of, do I have to go to work? But probably more something that I feel like I struggle with navigating is like, I should be in the studio, is taking time out of the studio, because, it's kind of like being a teacher. There's always a lesson plan you can be working on.
Oh, yeah.
That was what I studied in college was elementary. I wanted to be an elementary school teacher. And so,
oh, really?
That's one of those professions, like being self-employed artist. That
you would have been an amazing elementary school teacher.
Yeah, second grade. That was when I did all my student teaching. Wow. Second grade was my favorite.
Yeah, you have an incredible thing with kids. I've seen you out on the road. We have been fortunate enough to be neighbors at the Des Moines Arts Festival, and one year you and I were side by side, and the next year we were across the street. But the side by side, that's the one that drove my wife crazy because she's a jeweler, and in that business, you can't walk away because somebody could walk by and scoop up your livelihood and put it in their pocket. Where you and I sell large, heavy things that nobody's walking away with.
I'll be back in an hour.
Yeah. So you and I had a double corner, and we sat there and had like a 4-day conversation. And then, let me go in there and sell 4 hours worth of work or something like that in 10 minutes and then go back and do my conversation. But I was sat across from you one year and I couldn't move. It was so freaking hot.
Oh my God, that year, I don't think there's a year that I think it'll be a long time till there's that year at Des Moines was beyond. I mean, people talk about Ann Arbor. I've never done Ann Arbor, but that was just unbelievable. What was it, 115 with the heat index, and people were going to the hospital?
The index was 115, and I just couldn't. At some point, I'd be like, well, I feel like I'm dying now, so I'm going to go sit in the coffee shop for 2 hours.
Yeah, and nobody came.
When have you ever done that?
Nobody came on Saturday. It was like cooled down to 100. Yeah. And Saturday night, I thought, we were all thinking people were going to come back out. It was just, it was like people were all, so, it was bonkers.
During that heat of the day, and we're having very limited, and this I feel like defines you a little bit, and I meant to share this with you, and again, I haven't thought about it except that time, but it was so hot we couldn't even talk to each other at the end of the show. We just left.
So gross.
So but I took this mom and this little boy came by your booth, and this little boy's talking to you, and you just immediately, in spite of the 115, you're down on the ground talking to the boy. And I actually took a couple of pictures of you because I thought it was so funny and so sweet. And also there was an element of like, Jesus, how in the world are you able to engage on this level? But you're down on the ground. You even did like a Superman on the ground with this little boy. And you're like, bah, da, 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 da. Like, it was amazing. And also like, I can't, how's he doing it? I just can't even do it. And I sent the picture to Susie and I'm like, hey, check this out. Look at
my neighbor's lost his mind. Yeah, kids. Kids have always been my favorite. I was always the babysitter. And I was like a psych social work major. The first couple of years of college, I wanted to work with abused kids. And then you realize, like, just be a teacher. You'll work with that same population, just in a different setting.
Right.
But yeah, kids always bring a smile to my face. They'll ask you anything. Maybe that's, they're on my level, right? They'll ask you an inappropriate question. They want to know. They have that curiosity. So I feel like it's kinship with the little people. They love you. They hug you and kiss you on the mouth and want to ride around on your leg. And I feel like that's pretty endearing. It's honest. Yeah, it's honest. It's human, right?
Yeah.
They're not afraid to tell you the truth, or say they don't like it, or say they like it, and I feel like that.
Yeah, it only especially hurts when it comes from your own kids.
Exactly.
So that's when they really
what do you mean? I'm your dad.
All right. How are your kids? What are the ages you've got
24
there?
and 18. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's goes,
they still just kicking your ass?
It's not kicking my ass, but they're definitely, our therapist says to us, well, it sounds like your boys are making their own choices, which is great. And it's been a treat watching them navigate. And we've been through some hard stuff, mental health stuff. And you realize what's most important is not always what college you're going to choose. What's most important is can you talk about your feelings? Can you have a successful relationship? can you move towards being independent? And there's, fortunately, there's lots of ways to do that. Lots.
Yes.
I don't know about
Definitely.
you, but as you, when your kids are younger, you have ideas. And then as they get older and you see more and more of who they are and how they operate. And I feel like it's just staying connected and being with them on the journey, whatever that looks like. Sometimes that's really challenging, is really in the long run, your only play, like as frustrating as that might be at times,
Yes.
it's like, hey, I'm your dad. I love you. You're a good person and we'll figure it out together.
Yeah. Or it's, I don't know, parenting is like a big old Jeff Sackman sculpture. You can let the ball roll and you can tap it here and there, but it's going to go down its own chute.
Yeah. You really, your influence, your sphere of influence gets smaller in a lot of ways, but you do always have control over that connection. And that can be challenging as well if they're in a tough spot. But yeah, I mean, that's really, you want to look back and say you're putting that connecting foot forward the most. And I think that's what'll get you through it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And you are dealing with constant change with those guys too, as I am. I've got 14 and
they
12,
are too.
So they are.
I mean, they are too. The world, social media, sex, substance, mental health, school, expectation, body image. I mean, man, it is a lot to navigate. We have 2 boys, and a lot of people say, well, fortunately you don't have girls. I don't know. Yes, girls, when it comes to pregnancy and having babies and stuff, push come to shove, they're the ones that bear the brunt of that physically. But man, raising boys, I want my boys to be as engaged and responsible for those kind of decisions as anybody. And so because of that, the risks and the pressures are just as great, I feel like. And it's, trying to raise men that can talk about their feelings, be respectful, checking in, apologizing. I mean, it's tough. It's tough growing up now. I think it is
the pulls on
totally.
them and the toxic masculinity trope that you could just let them go down that path if you wanted, or if you don't guide them enough, all of those things. And it is tough. How do your kids do they guide or impede any of that kind of creative process as far as being a parent and trying to be present and also be an artist and
I mean, for sure. I think when they were younger, leaving for shows and stuff was always just so hard. I'd be coaching basketball, or we'd be getting in the water after school, and then I'd be trying to get stuff ready, and I'd be leaving for a week. And I remember one time loading up the van, and Hank was probably 5 or 6, and he's, I wish you didn't have to leave, Dad, or whatever. And I'm kind of like, have big tears in my eyes, hugging my wife goodbye and telling my kids goodbye. And she said, babe, it could be way worse. And I said, yeah, how could it be worse? And she said, if we couldn't wait for you to leave. And I said, yeah. So she said, babe, I've got it. Have a good show and we'll see you when you get back. We can't wait for you to be home. And I said, yeah, that would be way worse. That would be way worse,
Yeah.
So to have that connection at home. Yeah, that was I've told that little interaction to so many people, and it's true. That would be way worse. When's Dad getting out of here? So the fact that we like to be together is you kind of hang on to that when it's tough and you're in Chicago and you've been gone for 10 days and you're not going to be home for another 6 and it's raining and it's like,
well, that's the thing too, is that your travel times are a lot different. I always said that if I lived in Richmond, Virginia for a long time, so I worked that 95 corridor as far as shows go, and I'd dip all the way down to Miami. You could get there and that would be a day and a half, but you could get to almost any show you wanted to do in 12 to 14 hours. You could do a whole schedule, whereas you've got you're not just going to Chicago. It's Old Town plus a couple of days of travel each way.
It's 32 hours to Chicago. It's 48 hours to Miami. It's 40 hours to Philly. Yeah, I mean, the closest shows that we do is La Quinta is 6 hours, and then Art in the Pearl is 13. Park City is 13. But yeah, to get out to the Midwest, it's 20 plus. Denver's almost 20. So you're always trying to link a few together. Always.
Okay. So you have to put together, like I've said this before, but it's like if I'm telling a new artist, it's like, okay, take a 200-mile thread and drop that on anywhere on the Mississippi River, and that's where you should live as an art show artist. But we didn't do that. That's
I mean, and we have artists and friends that live in all those areas, have community in all those areas and stuff.
Nice.
I really enjoy living where we live. Lucky enough to live by the ocean is just such a huge part of who I am. There's just more logistics if you're going to, make a living doing art festivals in the Midwest where we live. And so you drive, you fly, you just make it work, and you just be good with your money when you make it. You got to do that on any level as an artist. But it's we have our families out here and great community and friends and stuff. So it's worth it. But it's not, Rob and Leslie living in Iowa. It's like 10 hours from Dallas, 5 hours from Chicago.
Right.
It's like,
so Rob Matthews and Leslie Guinan, who you're talking about, some close friends of ours, they were Californians forever, and then decided to move because of what we're talking about. It just was too much.
Yeah. You're always linking several together, which works. There's always some schedule you can piece together.
Yeah, it does. But you do that drive and park and fly kind of thing.
Yeah. Fly and
throw your catalytic converters to
exactly.
Just to the gods.
Yeah, exactly. I haven't had, knock on wood, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, but I haven't had a massive breakdown. I guess I did when I had to cancel Des Moines 2 years ago. I had a transmission issue, but other than that, I haven't had any really grave mechanical issues or had
you were really putting yourself out there.
I know.
That's just
we talk about that here when you're getting ready to go surfing. It's like you're never asking the person you're going, have you ever seen a shark? When you're putting on your wetsuit, you're like, dude, what are you doing right now? What are you talking about? Stop saying
right.
that. It's like,
that's your tempting fate right there.
It feels like that way. But
it's amazing community that we have, though. I had car trouble one time, and I was on my way, and it was just with my trailer. Mm-hmm. I had, I just got out there, and I think I texted one friend, and then they were back, and all of a sudden there were 3 people volunteer. Oh, I'm on Route 10, coming through Louisiana, because we were doing that winter park to Bayou City run. And all of a sudden I had like Chris Bruno and Kemper and a couple other folks who were like, we can throw your shit in the van. How bad is it?
Yeah.
This is a great community. It's a great family.
Totally.
That we have,
and from resources of advice on shows, materials or whatever, it's if you want to lean in and take advantage of that, I think most people are, because we've all been there. We've all been stuck on the side of the road going, I wish Chris Bruno was coming my direction right now, or whatever. It's, once you've been there, it's like boating is the same way, right? You always stop to help somebody when you're out on the ocean or out on a lake, because invariably it'll be you, and you want somebody stopping to help you.
Exactly. It's all part of the circle of
karma.
Kindness, anything. It's just we do help each other, and we rely on each other quite a lot as far as, when injuries happen. And a lot of us are getting older too. You talk about that. I've talked to some artists who have, they just can't quite do it anymore. And I've gone back to help some friends that have, I haven't been able to help because they've already been on the road or something like that. You see them struggling through, but certain breakdowns have been just savagely brutal. And I don't need to call any shows out by name because they can't control the wind or the weather. But man, it's a tough business. A little empathy goes a long way.
Yeah, and if you can, all your panels are still up and somebody's struggling with the wind or with their, I don't know. I always feel like I can help somebody out for 10 minutes or carry the last big load or something. I feel like what that does just for, we're all in this together, and it's ironic. That doesn't seem like a very much of an American sentiment right now, or nothing we really want to admit as a nation. It just seems like we don't want to all be in this together, but we are. So I feel like, helping each other out, having a little empathy, checking in. I mean, you get a lot of opportunity to do that doing the art show circuit. And that's my favorite. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I got a phone call from a friend that was, 20 feet away, and she's out on the street and has forgotten the chuck in order to get the shelf off of the booth that she designed. And she was like, can you help me? The tent is starting to come down. It's like the main, it's Main Street.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to not give them a
Mm-hmm.
shout, but Main Street, Fort Worth. And, they take that tent down, that street, you can't tell that we were there the next morning.
Yeah, it's gone.
And that you can hear, and it's like, I've already, I'm sitting there in my boxers ready to turn the lamp off. And she's like, can you help me? You're like, yeah, let's go. And I mean, unfortunately, my version of helping was like, look, we can't find the chuck. I don't have that kind of chuck. The shelf's got to go.
Yeah.
It's coming off the wall. It was just like, I just manhands it. Just, here it comes, and we can help fix it later. But man, it's these situations we all get into, man. It's a strange world out there. So
yeah, there can be lots of unknowns and unpredictable.
Definitely
more so than normal.
You mentioned Rob and Leslie, some good art show friends. I've reached out since he is close to you. I was like, hey, what do I ask Anthony? So this one's coming from Iowa. He was like, you got to ask him about his, and I've been kind of getting away from some of the early stages. I thought I was like, well, I want to get down into the dirt and see, get under the skin and see what makes people tick, as far as like hear some stories too.
Mm-hmm.
Like I like talking to Ray Alphonse and getting into the stories. I'm like, just shut up and listen to the storytelling time. But he did want me to ask you, like, your early work. Like, you had a completely different body of work as well. Like what was that all about? I didn't even know what was your early start.
Early work. Goes. I feel like, before I was supporting myself as an artist, I graduated with a degree in education, a degree in fine art. I wasn't thinking about being an artist. Just every time I could take an elective, I took an art class. And it ended up being, I was fifth year college student, and I double majored. When I graduated, I was doing a little of this, doing a little of that. I climbed for an arborist. I climbed and pruned trees with chainsaw and rope. Landscaping business. I did construction cleanup. But along the way, when I was doing that, I did some like these smaller pieces, wood, nails, wire.
Oh, wow. So always 3D kind of sculptural stuff?
Yeah, I did some lamps. I did nails and baling wire and marble candle holders.
Okay.
I was always a maker. I was always wanting to make something. I was always losing my dad's socket sets. I was always cutting myself with a sheetrock knife. I was always breaking the blades on the jigsaw. I was always wanting to try to add a room onto the tree house, or, we grew up on 11 acres. And so I was always out, like, make something, gluing something, clamping something. So never real efficiently. I don't know that I ever had a lot of expertise, but I was models. I was always interested in making something.
Okay, cool. Your father, you mentioned a couple of times, he's dropped some pearls on us through you here a couple of different times, but was he kind of out there helping you figure stuff out?
My dad was a hospital administrator, and my mom was an emergency room nurse. My he built some furniture for the house, whatever. He was busy elementary school and high school, traveling it as a hospital in administration. But yeah, there was always tools in the garage.
Stuff at your disposal.
Yeah, stuff I could lose and he could be frustrated at. Like, well, he'd always say, well, it didn't get up and just walk away. So where is it? I don't know, Dad. Then it's like rusted out behind the basketball hoop and the weeds. Oh yeah, I guess I was using it out there. So
yeah, that's.
But yeah, his dad was a contractor, a builder, and then my mom. We always had music, tons and tons of music in our house. So my mom's real creative in that way. So they were both real inspiring to me and supportive of any creative endeavor, whether it was music or putting something together or singing.
Do you play?
Growing up, it was like taking an instrument was like most families taking a sport. It was like, you're going to take an instrument. That wasn't really, I don't look back and feel like that was an option. It was just a given. So I took piano for like 8 years, and then I played trombone in high school. And then I took guitar lessons a little bit at some point. I probably
Yeah, we've talked a lot about music as far as being out on the road, and it's one of our bonding things.
Yeah.
What are you
Oh
listening
my
to?
gosh, I just love music. I'm
Yeah,
totally,
is
there's this great app, NTS Radio, and it's
yes,
DJs
you
from
turned me
all
on
over
to
the
that.
world playing all kinds of music every day in the studio. I pull up the app and see what's been uploaded from Manchester or Zimbabwe or whatever, and it's vinyl. It's just all kinds of collections of music from. I love it.
Yes,
And yeah, you and I have exchanged some, like, there's a guy in Bristol, England or something that's all like old timey folk and country music from the United States, and it's always
right.
all vinyl, and yeah, I love it.
Incredible. Give me that name app again. I was talking on top of you just so people can tune in
Oh
if they're
yeah,
interested to it.
NTS, N is in Nancy, NTS Radio. That app is
Yeah,
just
and it's just an
awesome.
app, and you can pull up stuff from radio shows from all over the world.
Yeah,
Is that what gets you down the road? I mean, you're talking about all these miles, these 40-hour drive to Philly. Like,
yeah.
how
I
do you
feel
do
like
it?
when I'm on the road, I mostly listen to cooking podcasts. I
Really?
know. I
That's
love being in the
incredible.
kitchen. That's probably my favorite place to be. I
Yeah,
love sharing food and making food. I'm usually kind of the cook at home, and
yeah.
so yeah, there's KCRW's Good Food. That's the Splendid Table, the Sporkful. There's a bunch of really great podcasts that talk about restaurants, talk about food, talk about ingredients, talk about process. We love that whole Chef's Table series on Netflix.
That's really interesting. That's funny with the things that people listen to. Like the way that Susan and I get down the road is typically, like, lately we've been doing this thing. It's like, okay, we have an 8-hour drive today, and you're like, 8 hours? That's
Yeah,
nothing.
exactly.
But
We'll come down
yeah,
for
but
lunch.
you're like, okay, it's right. So it's like, okay, that's you can pick three different things, three podcasts, or no, you've got three, I've got
Yeah.
three, and then there's going to be 2 hours of talking about all of that too. So it's like, all right, well, I'm going to pick these two albums in this one podcast, and she's going to pick, these whatever,
Oh,
and then it
that's
ends up
good.
being this thing, and it's like, okay, your turn,
Yeah.
and then we end up talking about it, and she'll get a little bit headier with some of the podcasts, and then that leads to some really, really interesting conversations. The Brene Browns and your Russell Brand has an
Huh.
interesting kind of heady podcast as far as talking. He talks to some big
Yeah.
thinkers, and he's kind of made a living on being kind of a jackass on film, but he's a really, really heady, interesting guy.
Yeah, it's
to
different.
listen
It's
to.
definitely different. You talking about you and Susan. It's definitely different when my wife and I go together, which is only like twice a year because she works full time out of the home. When we go together, we'll pick a podcast like that, like something like that, and listen to it. Or I will have listened to a podcast and like, oh babe, I want you to hear this, and then
Yeah.
we talk about it, or we'll pause it and talk about it. We're always interested in relationship. I mean, that series, How I Built This.
Yeah, it's a great
On,
one.
I listen, and I can just listen to NPR programming all day. I think that's interesting too. I'm kind of
Right.
I like Morning Edition and All Things
Exactly.
Considered and Democracy Now!
So you work in, I mean, it's funny, we've talked almost for an hour now, but I haven't really talked about the work that you're making right now, but I did want to talk about like how you obviously you're a metal artist, you're a fabricator, cold connection fabricator, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're doing a lot of recycled metals.
Yeah, it's all car bodies mostly.
Yeah, and getting all of that color off the car bodies, and how do you go about collecting your work? And
I mean, I'm always
yeah.
I'm just in driving around, I'll stop and grab an orange Coleman cooler from the side of the road in 1 second, just because I don't paint anything color wise. So anything I can find goes into the available stack of color palette that I'm working with. But mostly I go to the wrecking yard. There's two huge wrecking yards inland from us here. I go there and take my trailer and wander around. It's probably 5-10 acres of cars, and find those old pea green Volvos, or those late 50 Ford, or some beat up silver Toyota Tacoma, or I'm really just looking for color. People say, oh, are you a car guy? And I'd love to be a car guy, but I'm I'm not.
You're like Sarah Bean. She's like, she loves reading books, but she cuts them up for a living.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm always I'm a car guy the most because that vehicle meant something to somebody. All the camping trips, the trips to the store, the trips to the school, and everything. So
you think about the history of those when you pull them apart.
Yeah, and when you have a piece that's got 30 different vehicles in it, and you can touch that 82 Toyota Corolla.
Yeah.
Right there, that's the paint that was washed and waxed by the owner. That's my favorite. If you were to paint over it or something, to me, I would lose that. I would lose that story. I would lose that. I would lose that sort of important piece to me.
Yeah. Do you ever feel any bad energy off of those vehicles as well? Like, I remember
that's
like
an interesting question.
Yeah.
No. I don't. And plenty of cars. I don't know if you mean like mortal bad energy. Plenty of those cars.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, not necessarily like the death of whatever, but I'm almost thinking about, I remember looking at old homes sometimes, and you're looking for a house to buy, and you walk into a space and it's like, well, it's a beautiful space, but not to get all hippy dippy on it, but it feels like, this feels like bad shit went down in here.
Yeah. No, I don't feel that as much.
Yeah.
And ironically, there's most cars in the wrecking yard are not there because of some high-speed head-on.
Good.
Most of them are abandoned vehicles. There's lots of cars that don't have any body damage at all. Old cars, new cars. So, I think mostly cars end up there because of mechanical failures or issues or lack of maintenance or whatever. So, yeah, no, I don't feel much bad mojo wandering around.
Yeah, good. That seems like it could affect it. You have two, what I consider kind of two different bodies of work almost, where you have your representational or your shapes and your hearts, and then you have some more abstract painting wise, and the way that the colors work within each other, that almost seems like geometric abstract. But do you ever feel, and I've asked this to other folks in a couple of different ways, but do you ever feel like the public's perception or their expectation of your work affects your creativity at all? What you think that you have to show as far as being at a show?
I was wondering if you're going to ask me this, and I appreciate when other artists are real honest when they're having conversations with you. So I'll totally, I have a huge, at times, or I can make an argument for a big insecurity with doing the hearts. Plenty of people come to the booth and that's their favorite.
Right. And
plenty of people come to the booth and go, hearts, really?
Yeah.
I believe in that shape. That's the person.
You have to.
That's the person I want to. Well, not just a business wise. I believe in it from like a connection wise. I believe, for me, it's tough to see a heart and not think that it's underneath it is something positive. I mean, that's why we're all connected. It's human, whatever. But definitely, there's a portion of doing hearts for sure that's business. We're not in the position financially to just do exactly always with every piece exactly what I want to do. I mean, I think if that was the case, I would do those big grid pieces, but they'd all be like 8 foot by 8 foot.
Yeah.
This big, enormous. I believe in the hard shape. I believe I'm using materials that are unique for executing it. But there definitely is awareness that that's part of us paying the bills is that work. And so
but you're creating it within the realm of what you still want to do.
Sure.
It's not,
and
I feel like if you weren't, people can smell it on you. I've done things that have sold really well, compositions or stories that I've told that I finished telling the story, and then all of a sudden I'm broke, and I'll go back to that story, and it's like pulling teeth to get through it. And then I get it. And then all of a sudden, instead of selling it at every show, I have it for a while. It's like they can smell the desperation off of it maybe, or there's a weird kind of, again, I don't know why we're getting so mojo-ish on this particular talk, but it's like people can kind of smell the desperation on it. They're like, I think it's not interesting anymore.
I think you can tell, and nobody really comes to mind with this, but I think you can tell when somebody's just grinding it out. And I definitely, like you're saying, for yourself, for myself, if there's ever a piece or a time where you're just grinding it out, I feel like the work reflects that. It's hard to genuinely talk to somebody about that type of work. It's hard to, I don't think you can fake it. So I feel like making work that resonates with you as an artist that you feel good about making, I think that's probably the only option. Otherwise, it's just business, and there's better businesses to run, more financially successful businesses. There's more of a blueprint. I always say if I was just doing it for the money, you'd be doing something different. So
Exactly. And that's the way I feel. I feel like as soon as you've lost energy, then it doesn't feel real anymore. And I feel like it still feels real. You're trying to say something, that might be considered kind of a cliched shape with a different way, like you're saying, with the objects, with the, it's like I get there's an artist on the circuit, and I'm not going to name her by name, but she calls you Handsome Heart. She's like, Handsome Heart, he's out there.
That's funny.
It's funny to hear other people's perceptions.
Yeah,
right?
Sure. I mean, and I feel like that's why those abstract grids, those steel quilt looking pieces, that scratches a different itch in terms of like use of color. It's the same material. There's a lot of things that the material use is. I'm as interested in the material in that abstract work, but you don't have that heart shape you're hanging your hat on. You're doing it a different way, and for me, it's a different type of challenge of trying to make work that I'm aesthetically pleased with when it's those squares and rectangles.
Yeah, I'm sure. And you have to make those shapes. Do you make? Do you put it together kind of, I'm not going to try to give away your secrets or anything, but do you kind of, do you paint with it almost like you're painting with those? Do you create the shapes first to kind of make a puzzle and let it speak to you?
On that grid work?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I come up with a basic color palette, and then, I lay out the grid on the panel, and then I lay in the pieces, move them around, take pictures, send pictures to my wife. What do you see here? I like how this looks. So it's kind of a lot of blue on the right-hand side, whatever, that kind of thing sometimes. And then once it's all kind of laid out-ish, then I start welding and doing the things to actually put the different elements together. But I kind of like get the hearts go together just one piece at a time real organically. The grid work is more, I lay it out more. I feel like the material is so rough that those grid pieces is kind of like you're using the analog of the material, and then I want it to be kind of like math to keep it real contemporary.
Right.
I want it to look real clean. So I feel like there's a different attention to detail with that work.
Yes.
I'm wanting it to elevate the materials to the point where they're abstracted from their place of origin. Most people have no idea that it's a car. I'll even tell people it's all made from car bodies, and then they'll say, well, how do you get the color on there? That's the buy-in when people go, that's actually the car. And I say, that's actually the car body. That's the people who like the work. That's their in. They really like that aspect of it. And that's my in for using that material as well. Yeah.
Very cool. And it's, there's got to be some kind of element of using recycled product in order to tell your stories, tell stories of like kind of the vintage versus the modern.
Yeah, it's a human. I mean, everyone's got a car. Everyone goes places in the car. I mean, it's relatable in a way that, like it or not, especially here in the United States, cars are a huge deal out of necessity and out of enjoyment and collections and stuff like that. So using that material, I find really interesting.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. You've been somebody I've wanted to, both Douglas and I have wanted to have on the show for a very long time. So I appreciate you being patient with the timing of it and the generosity you've had with all of your sharing all of your valuable input. So thank you, sir.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Will. And I've always appreciated my connection with you. I love you a lot. I respect you a lot. Buddy. I look forward to seeing you out on the road probably next year, unless you're going to be at La Quinta.
I was on the fence there, and I'm not, so I'll miss you there. But next time, I can't wait until the next time, and I owe you a beer or two.
Okay, well, I'll be giving you a squeeze.
All right, brother.
Okay, love you.
Bye. Love you too.
That was a beautiful talk you had there with Anthony Hansen. Will, I appreciate you so much for talking to him.
It's a no bullshit talk, and to be honest, I needed that one as much as I felt like it's good for the audience. I really was in a place where I needed a little pick-me-up. I needed that kind of honest connection. Kind of felt good that his camera wasn't working and that we just kind of got into it. Felt like I called him up.
Oh, like, just having a personal chat.
Yeah, but it also, we dug down into some things that I really felt like talking to him about. So I'm glad
Well, several years back, my dad sat us all down. I thought we were going to have this very big talk. And he says, I just want you guys to know that I'm done with small talk. I'm no longer doing small talk. I'm only doing large talk. And my son was just a little kid at the time. And he got really enthused by this whole concept. And he says, Grandpa, I want to have huge mongus talk. This was huge mongus talk.
Excellent. That's really cool. No more small talk. It felt good.
Yeah. And the other thing I loved was his talk about being a dad. I mean, we're dads, and I'm at that point that he was talking about, about kids' choices and them becoming adults and moving into this next stage of life. And at some point I realized recently that for so much of our kids' lives, we make choices for them so they have the best possible outcome, And at some point when your kids get to be adults, you think, I don't make those choices anymore. We've taught them well, we've handed it over to them, and now they make those choices for themselves. They get to decide their outcomes. And I just loved that part of his talk about being a dad, about, kind of turning yourself over to the process. And it was cool.
Right. Lots of parallels with the art show world, but sometimes it's just more important to be the family guy. And he and I have had that. He's mentioned that thing to me too before, where he's like, well, at least we're all sad that you're leaving.
That's a big
we're
deal.
Not celebrating.
That really touched my heart, because I spent a lot of my years on the road waving goodbye to the family and feeling like sad.
Yeah.
And that was a really good moment when he said that. I'm like, that's true. But they were all happy when I came home, and they were sad I was leaving. So that tells you you're doing something right, I guess.
Absolutely. Get there home safe, folks. Get out there on the road and sell your wares and get home to the folks that love you or take them with you. We got to get going. I got to go pick up my kid from cross country. Douglas has to go saw his own foot off. We're going to see you in a couple weeks.
All right, guys. We'll see you later. Thanks, Will, for hammering this out. Have a good one, man.
All right, buddy.
Bye.
This podcast is brought to you by the National Association of Independent Artists. The website is naiaartists.org.
Also sponsored by Zapplication. That's zapplication.org. And while you're at it, check out Will's website at willarmstrongart.com and my website at sigwithglass.com.
Be sure to subscribe to this podcast to be notified when we release new episodes.